Do you think stealth in AC Valhalla is going to be interesting from what you've seen so far? I think it will be. Yeah. I think that here's what makes stealth games tick, quote unquote. It's what like makes them work is one, interesting interactions between player and guards. Two, level design. And three, consistency and or predictability, right? AC Valhalla pretty much has these things like to varying degrees, which I think that Odyssey didn't, and Origins also didn't. Origins was a little bit better about it, but here's the thing. If we're really worried about consistency, and what I mean by consistency is it goes from the micro scale to the macro scale. It's like on the one hand, you have consistency on the micro scale, which is, are my interactions with guards consistent? Do they happen every time? Right? So, for example, the biggest example would be if I stab a dude, does he die? Right? And obviously, Odyssey had a huge problem with this. So did Origins, but it was worse in Odyssey, where, you would stab a guy and he wouldn't die. And it would kind of throw off your groove, so to speak. So that's not something we want. So Valhalla addresses this in two ways. One, it gives us advanced assassinate, which is a mini game, right? Like, you go to stab the guy, and if he's too high level and you have the advanced assassinate skill unlocked in your passives menu, like in your little skill tree, then the circles will appear on the screen, and the white circle will shrink into the orange circle, and then if you hit it at the right time, you kill the guy by default. Like, it doesn't matter. He can be stronger than you, he can be higher level than you, it's okay, he still dies. Now, if you really don't want to screw around with this minigame, you can go to the accessibility options and toggle on guaranteed assassinate. And what that does is it causes assassination attempts to auto-resolve. So you don't need any more input beyond you sneak up behind the guy, you play the game correctly, you press the button, and he dies, no bullshit. So that's like the second concession that they've made for us to kind of, increase the consistency in terms of like interactions. And of course, there's still the damage prediction on arrow headshots. So if you're about to shoot a guy in the face and you see your damage prediction is not going to kill him instantly, then you just don't take the shot. Obviously, we would prefer for headshots to also be insta-kills, but frankly, that one doesn't bother me so much. Have you tried stealth in Far Cry 2, Leo? Kind of hard for me. Yeah, I would not really recommend playing Far Cry 2 as a stealth game. You can use stealth at times to like engage and disengage, but for the most part, you're going to be having gunfights. Slick Lion asks, when Valhalla is out, are you going to split Genshin and Valhalla streams or just Valhalla? I don't know. I can't really predict that. I might be doing Valhalla like to start out with and just like burn my resin every day on just like random bullshit to get it out of the way. But, for the most part, like the bulk of my playtime will be Valhalla because like I need to experience that game because one, it's Assassin's Creed, it's my favorite thing in the world, and two, I need to get ready for Cyberpunk. But yeah. Hello Barker. Nice to see you here. And to go back to continue answering the is stealth in Valhalla going to be interesting question. Consistency was the first point I was talking about, so let's continue talking about that. So on the micro level, it's like, are my interactions with guards consistent? And on the macro level, there's the idea of do the game's systems overall have a level of predictability and a level of consistency? And I think that they do. I think that hopefully we will be able to restart from checkpoint. We'll still have the manual save slots that Odyssey included, so that's kind of nice. Obviously I can't actually predict this, we have to play the game and find out, but I feel like it will be decent. And then the next point is level design, right? I don't know if you guys watched the recent videos released by playtesters and people who got a chance to play the game before release. For example, Turul on YouTube has a really good stealth gameplay video that you guys should check out. You can see the level design in Valhalla is significantly enhanced from what it was in both Origins and Odyssey, especially in the interiors, which a lot of the game takes place in now, apparently, just because people like to be indoors, they like to have their meetings indoors and talk about their shady conspiracy shit indoors. So you can sneak indoors, and one of the big things that me and a bunch of other people have noticed is that in the rafters above, close to the ceiling and stuff, there's a lot of crisscrossing beams and just stuff like that lets you navigate the space. It has the high and low dichotomy that Assassin's Creed has always, traditionally had. And that was kind of missing in Origins and kind of missing in Odyssey. Both of them still had it, but like Valhalla has it much more. It's got that, classic vibe of you can stay high and kind of be safe and get a bird's eye view, or you can, move down to where your objectives are, but then you're more exposed. This is a classic element of AC that I'm really happy is back. So that's going to be a huge thing. The level design makes a massive difference in how stealth feels, because stealth is ultimately about movement. It's ultimately about movement and timing and positioning. And what do movement and timing and positioning all have in common? Well, what they all have in common is that they require a play space to do them in. They require an area. They require a level, essentially. Like, it's weird to talk about quote-unquote level design in open world games, because like the whole world is the level. But you guys know what I mean. When I talk about level design in open world games, what I'm referring to is just the encounter zones, like the restricted areas that have like their little checklist of stuff to finish, that have their, targets and their guards and whatever. The level design in Valhalla looks much better than the level design in Origins and Odyssey. At times, and I don't think this will be a common thing, because, it's impossible for it to be a common thing, but at times it seems like it's almost classic AC level design, especially in the distrust zones where it's got like the social stealth going on. And that's the next thing I wanted to talk about is mechanics, stealth mechanics, the different interactions that you can have between yourself and the game space, or between yourself and the guards. Social stealth, like, okay, think about it this way. In AC1 to Revelations, right, let's use AC1 to Revelations because they were the most quote-unquote pure, right? In that game, we had social stealth, but we did not have traditional stealth, and we did not have what I call, bush stealth or brush stealth. In AC3 and Black Flag and Rogue, to varying degrees, we had social stealth, but it wasn't a lot, because a lot of those games took place in natural environments, and in a way they were kind of like the precursors to the Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla era, right? In AC3, Black Flag, and Rogue, for the most part, you're doing what I would call like natural stealth, or like bush stealth, where you're hiding in bushes, right? They also wove in a little bit of traditional stealth DNA, where you could take cover against a wall and like whistle to people to draw them toward you and then shank them when they came close. They had a little bit of that. And then in Unity removed natural stealth or bush stealth, right? You're not hiding in bushes because there's no bushes in Paris, but they ratcheted up the traditional stealth. Unity has had up to that point the most quote-unquote traditional / line of sight / obfuscation stealth that Assassin's Creed had ever seen, so they added a crouch button, and then all the very stupid people came out of the woodwork and they were like, oh my god, they finally added crouching to a stealth game, which of course they didn't realize that the analog to crouching that we had back in the day was social stealth, was blending into crowds, right? Like, that's your crouch button. Obviously it doesn't feel that way, and people didn't really understand it that way, but even as far back as AC1, which, by the way, this is why I think it was a mistake to make blending a passive state as opposed to like an active button that you hold down. Your crouch button in AC1 was your blend button. It was Altair putting his hands together to pray. That's your crouch button. When you're quote-unquote crouching, you are harder to see, right? So when you are blending in AC1, you are harder to see. In fact, you are essentially impossible to see. That's why blending was so strong. Now, the cost you paid for this was that you moved very slowly, but again, think about what crouching caused you to do. It caused you to move slowly. So like, functionally, in terms of like mechanical analogs, social stealth and blending, like going into active blend, was your crouch button in AC1. Visually, Altair doesn't actually crouch when you do it, but mechanically, that's essentially what it was. And of course, people didn't realize this, and it didn't exactly help that from AC2 and forward, blending was made a more passive thing. Like, the most active sense of it was that you as a player had to actually move into clusters of people, crowd groups of 4 or more. Sometimes 2 or 3, depending on the situation, but for the most part, it would be 4, right? And so when Unity came out, lots of people were like, "Oh my god, they finally added crouch to a stealth game! Holy shit!" And the world went crazy, like, "Oh my god, like finally!" And which was always hilarious to me for the reasons I explained. But essentially, yes, Unity was the first quote unquote big AC game to actually introduce traditional stealth in a meaningful capacity. And after that, we had Syndicate, which kind of gave us the same thing. We had social stealth and traditional stealth. We could blend into crowds, we could crouch, we could take cover, things like that, things of that nature. And then, of course, stealth in Unity and Syndicate was very item heavy, was very item based. And this is something that a lot of, again, very stupid people disagree on. They're like, oh no, like the stealth in Unity and Syndicate shouldn't be item based. But it is. It doesn't matter how much you say it shouldn't be. You can't argue with reality. You can't deny reality. Like, it's in your face. Like, reality happens whether you want it or not. Unity and Syndicate are an item-based stealth game. Like, that's simply the case. There is nothing that's ever going to change that. Like, they are smoke bomb based. They are built on the smoke bomb as an item. They are projectile based. Like, you can't stop it from happening no matter how much you argue against it. Like, that's simply how it is, right? But anyway, and then Origins came. Now, Origins really did some interesting things. Origins, what they did was they kind of looked at all the other games that Ubisoft had made, and they kind of looked at all the, the other games on the market, So things like Metal Gear Solid, right? Metal Gear Solid 5 had recently come out, and they had a very kind of Far Cry-inspired stealth loop where you would mark guards, and once you mark guards, their positions. You have a very like tactical bird's eye view of the situation, and then you can get down to ground level, and because you've marked all the guards and you can see them through walls, it kind of acts as a replacement to a mini map, which in a way allows you to get more immersed in the world. And so Origins realized that, hey, if we took this element, what we can do is we can remove the mini map, right? Like, we can have a compass instead, which makes a player's eyes be more focused kind of like in the middle of the screen, right? Like, and then they would be glancing up to the top here instead of constantly like keeping their eyes in the corner. And in Assassin's Creed, the minimap is traditionally like down here, right? And that's what they did. They're like, hey, yeah, like we could have the player actually be looking at the beautiful world we're creating, because, to quote one of the designers on Valhalla, Assassin's Creed no longer considers themselves a city-based game. They consider themselves, I quote, an environment game. And I really disagree with this. Like, I don't disagree that that's what they see themselves as, because that's blatantly obvious. That is the case. It's true. That is what they see them as. I disagree that that's their goal. I disagree with the idea that, like, that's what Assassin's Creed should be. I think that's really shitty, and I think it makes it a worse experience for me personally as a player. Now, obviously, I'm going to crusade and argue and fight for the kind of game that I want to play, the kind of game that I want to experience, which is a very urban-heavy, a very city-based game. And I dislike this idea of, like, oh, we should make this giant, beautiful world with no buildings to climb, right? We should make this giant, beautiful world where, like, there's no advanced mechanics, just because everything is so wide and it's not clustered and it's not dense. I don't like that idea. Now, obviously, Valhalla is actually doing a lot to rectify this, which is nice, and I appreciate that a lot. I respect that a lot. It has my respect. But that's what Origins did. They made a stealth game where, as Barker said in chat, like roadmap stealth, where what you do is you mark and tag everybody, and now you know their positions, and then you go in. Now, because social stealth didn't exist at the time, what Origins and Odyssey have is bush stealth and traditional stealth. It's a hybrid. Now, are you guys seeing the pattern here? Are you guys seeing the pattern? What the pattern is every AC game has one or two stealth types, but never all of them. You see what I mean? It's always just one or two, and it's a different combination of one or two, and there's always one that's left out. Now, why do I think Valhalla is going to be interesting? Why do I think Valhalla is going to have interesting stealth mechanics and stealth systems? Well, it's because it's the only Assassin's Creed game in the entire series to actually combine all of their stealth archetypes together into one game. Valhalla has social stealth. You can put your cloak and your hood up and people will take a very long time to detect you in distrust zones, and you can blend into crowds of monks. You can sit on benches, right? It has social stealth. Valhalla has the bush stealth. You can hide in bushes. You can, hide in foliage and nature in the tops of trees, right? And it has traditional stealth, right? Like you can crouch, you can, go behind cover, you can make cover kills and things like that. It's the only game in the series to combine all three stealth archetypes together. And that necessarily means that it has the highest density and the highest quantity of stealth mechanics, simply because they have the most systems to work with and the most different systems to pull mechanics from, right? That's why I think mechanically it's going to be an interesting stealth game, because you're going to have many different situations and you're going to have many different opportunities to use those different mechanics. So if you're in a social stealth zone, like a distrust zone, maybe you begin by putting your hood up and your cloak up, and then like carefully like walking through the city gate, right? And then maybe you shank a guy or two, and then you realize, oh shit, like the guards are coming to look for me and all the civilians are dispersing, so now I can't really be doing social stealth anymore. So then you kind of crouch and you start like sneaking around, right? Like you start skulking through the alleyways and stuff as they're looking for you. Like Valhalla is the only Assassin's Creed game that's really going to offer something like this. And then as you get out kind of in the middle of the city, or if you're going through like a park, or you're going through like city limits or something, right, like on the outskirts of town, then maybe they're still looking for you, or like a zealot comes to try to kill you, which are kind of like big beefy mini bosses that patrol the world, right? Like, and then you start like hiding in the bushes and stuff, right? Like kind of like hiding in bushes, right? Like, you see what I mean? Like, it's the first and only Assassin's Creed game to combine all of their different like types of stealth into one, and to me that is deeply exciting and is very interesting. I'm very curious to see how these different systems interlock, how they work together. So that's my long answer to what I was asked earlier. Do I think Valhalla is going to have interesting stealth? The short answer is yes. I do.